Okay. So now I'm going to review some of the material that was covered in the last retreat, but in a slightly different way, so I don't think you'll be too bored, I hope. That was taking a good-natured poke at David, who's sitting right in front of me. So,
I'm not able to hear you because the microphone wasn't close enough to you.
I don't think this is going to work too well. Does that work? Can this be pushed away a little bit, maybe? Thank you. I need to have that information because I'm not very familiar with how to do this. Will that work? Can you hear me? You good? Anybody else who's having trouble hearing besides me? Good? Okay. Okay, so Christine, if I need to shift something, just tell me. So these three threads that we speak of as being, I'm hearing feedback. Are you hearing feedback? Are you hearing feedback?
Well, I'm adjusting for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I should just ignore it?
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like I'm humming to myself while I'm speaking, which would be interesting. To be able to accomplish that would be interesting.
The only way to completely eliminate it is just to move the microphone a little bit closer to you, which I know you don't want.
I feel like I ought to be a rock star. That's not on the tape, is it? Well, shall I do it again? Okay. Would that work better? Oh, I see what you mean. It makes a difference. You just have to educate me, you know. Okay. So I spoke about the three afflictive emotions, passion, aggression, and ignorance, as arising from that original and very innocent error of imputation of selfness to self, other, and all phenomena. And I referred to them as three threads, yes, that we're weaving relative reality with, out of which we weave our existence, these three threads of the afflictive emotions. And this is all based on the experience of beings who are not in the given instant, who are not resting in the true nature state, but are pulled from it by afflictive emotions, by reactions, by self-clinging, etc. Yes? That's sort of just to recap briefly what part of what I said this morning. So using this image of these three afflictive emotions, the three poisons, as threads with which we are weaving our existence, our experience of existence. In other words, we are weaving relative reality, we're weaving samsara with these three threads. That's how samsara is created, by our self-clinging, which gives rise to passion, aggression, and ignorance. Gives rise to and perpetuates. And what this means is that any action of body, speech, or mind, any expression or action, interior as thought or exterior as speech or behavior, action, that is taken under the sway of or arising from passion, aggression, or ignorance, is creating karma. Now, karma is not a spiritual law, it's a natural law of cause and effect. If I push this far enough to the edge, I'm not going to. There was panic in the first row. Right? Get it back. Cause and effect is what karma actually refers to. But there's a dynamic in it. It's not just one action and one effect. It's more subtle and more complex than that. I'm not a scholar of karma, but I'm a keen observer of karma because I've needed to understand it for myself. And so that makes you a keener observer of karma in general if you start observing it keenly in your own makeup and your own actions and the way you're. So samsara is sometimes referred to as suffering, the realms of suffering, or just simply as suffering. And anything that causes harm or that causes suffering is considered to be wrongdoing in the Dharma. And there is one of the verses that we read this morning aloud said that we should give up wrongdoing even at the cost of our life. And I remember as I contemplated that verse during my writing about that verse, I thought, come on, I'm not that heinous. I mean, seriously? You mean I shouldn't bite my fingernails even at the cost of my life, even though it does cause me suffering? It hurts, if you bite too far. Do you know what I mean? I'm giving a silly example, but we don't think of ourselves that way. What do you mean at the cost of my life? Well, think of it this way. It costs you a lot of lifetimes suffering for you, and they're very likely creating confusion in your surroundings and in your relationships, and the troubled world that we live in is our mirror. It's our mirror. There's nothing going on out there that doesn't have its reflection in here. Now, there's a sobering thought if you read the news regularly. And I mean to be sobering with that thought, because we don't think of ourselves that way as mirrors for the world, and the world is mirrors for us. Right? But here is where we start to take responsibility, start to look for where change can happen for us. We become complicit. And innocence turns to complicity pretty subtly. And I don't mean to do an indictment here, I'm not a prosecutor, but I want us to be very conscious of how in every moment that we're able to be aware of our minds. We're actually able to be aware of our minds in every moment, although we don't usually cultivate that kind of recognition, but we have the means to do that, and we can learn how to do that. And as we become increasingly aware of our minds, we become aware of what we're weaving with. Yes? Oh, I did that and said that, but that was actually a little bit of jealousy going on. I wasn't aware of it till it came out my mouth. At that point, we start to take responsibility for our envy. Or, I just really gave that person a passing glance. I didn't do anything about it. That wasn't infidelity, but, that was some special kind of glance. We become conscious of our responsibility, our ability to be responsible for our craving. Yeah? And then say you're in the line at the motor vehicle department. Now that set it up, right? What emotions do you expect to be experiencing now if you're in line at the motor vehicle department? And there's somebody who's just taking forever, and you've got your little card in your hand that has your number on it, and you can't wait for your number to be called. This other guy is just like on and on talking about his grandmother, and how she was such a really terrible driver. They were really worried and so on, and my son, he's the same way. And there you're sitting with your little card in your hand that has the number on it. And then you remember, oh, I'm a Dharma practitioner. I see that I was feeling a little impatient. I'm a Dharma practitioner, now I'm going to practice patience. So now you're standing up because you know that the line is moving, slowly, but you're standing, and you don't notice it right away, but you're practicing patience, and you're going like this. Notice the mouth and the foot. Are you practicing patience with that person or at that person? Patience has just been weaponized, right? When you see this, and we're able to see these things when we're curious. And curiosity is innocent. Curiosity doesn't have an agenda. You just want to see something. So when we open our minds that way and become curious in that friendly kind of way, we start to see what we weren't seeing so clearly before. That's where responsibility begins. But that's also where our power begins. The moment we can see the operations of mind with that kind of subtlety, first of all, it gives us a little distance from it in the sense that as we get closer to it by seeing it, we have a little distance from it because we are seeing it. At that moment, we're not caught in it. The moment that you're in confusion and you're just in confusion, you're caught. The moment you recognize, oh my God, my mind is really in a state of confusion at this moment, I better not speak. At that moment, you're not in it. What sees confusion is the clarity, right? And that's true whether you're in the line at the MVD or whether you're, sitting in front of, a little yogini here in the temple. Yeah? So both your responsibility and your capacity to take responsibility, in other words, your capacity for power in your life, to be creative, begin with recognition. So when we're speaking about karma, we want to be very good gardeners of the gardens of our mind and of our propensities. We want to know what seed we're planting. Because what seed of intention or action or speech you sow, that seed is going to be on the ground in its state of potential until the conditions and circumstances come together for that seed to fruit up, and then it will. It's not, oh, maybe it will. It will. That's what, we don't usually talk about karma this candidly, but Garchen Rinpoche does. We Americans, most of us in the room are Americans, right? Or we're mostly from the West, I'm thinking. And we have a very strange, different conception of karma than people who've grown up in cultures in which karma is really just part of the understanding of the nature of reality. And a friend of mine once put it that, actually the first director of the Garchen Institute, a wonderful woman named Kathy Dyer, once said, we Americans, the way we think about karma is just like, our whole legal system is built on the way we interpret karma. We think that if somebody, if I'm suffering, somebody did it to me, and they should pay me for that, right? It's the opposite. Garchen Rinpoche says very succinctly, very clearly, and very definitely, we will never experience anything in this or any lifetime, or this or any moment, for which we have not laid down the seed of cause. Now, some people think, oh no, that's terrible. What's terrible about it? It means we are absolutely in the state of creative empowerment in relation to karma. But it means two different things in relation to past karma and to future karma. They're related in the present moment. Past karma that we have sown the seeds for will fruit up when the conditions become right for that to happen. That's interdependence. There's a cause, and if the conditions then are conducive, the cause will flower into a plant, which means an experience of life, an experience in your life, and many causes of that kind laid down will create what we call karmic propensities, which means a tendency to do that which you have already been doing, right? That a karmic propensity is, I have a distinct tendency to do this over and over again, and I think, oh, it's a bad habit. It's a habituation that actually is a propensity, meaning you're likely to do that. You're more likely to do that than not to do that, given the conditions that are conducive. I think I lost my thread of thought just for a second. Let me see if I can get it back. Oh, yeah. So, when the fruits of past karma, good or bad, negative or positive, are evident in our experience or in appearances that are the phenomena that are of our life, our responsibility and our power in the face of the flowering of our karma are to work with it without engaging either any of the three afflictive emotions. Don't grab it, don't push it away, and don't make up a story about it. Please write that down. This is really important. You wrote it down last time. You don't have to write it down again. But this is very important because people, we don't know when we're faced with experience that is disturbing or enticing, we don't recognize it as something that we have created the cause for in our, in past actions or speech or mental operations. And when we recognize it that way, we can say, oh, this is mine. I did this. And then we can relax. We don't have to push it away or grab it or make up a story about it. We simply recognize it as an appearance arising from causes that we have set and allow it to go, because it will. Anything that arises is going to pass away. So we don't take it personally anymore, in the sense that we get upset about it or we try to get rid of it or try to make more of it. But we take it personally in this sense, which I find very helpful. That our relationship with karma is very intimate and very trustworthy. Karma is trustworthy. It's not like this sword of Damocles hanging over our heads. We can trust karma. We can trust that when we mean something good, good will come from that. That's a powerful, profound power that we have. The intention in the mind for good will bring about good. It definitely will. That doesn't mean you will necessarily recognize that result. It may be down the line, or it may be something that you think is awful but actually is good. That happens to us all the time, right? So it's trustworthy. You can trust karma. You can trust that if you mean the good, good will come of that intention and that action and that word. Equally, you can trust that if you mean wrong, if you mean harm, harm and suffering will come from that. And that gives you great authority to claim your right not to commit harm-doing. Much harm-doing is given opportunity and expression because it's taken for granted that that's what we do in certain kinds of situations. It's not like you're all ganging up, but there's a gang in the mind that says, well, of course, I'm going to give that guy the finger as I drive by, because look what he did, he cut me off, or of course I'm going to, not speak to that person for at least a week and a half because of what she or he said, a month ago. I mean, these are trivial, silly examples. I don't even know where they come from in my mind, but I guess I can trust them, yeah, because so recognizing the moment in which a harmful thought, or a good thought is arising in the mind, or the impulse of that thought before the thought actually forms, before the intention actually forms, that's the moment where you rest in the recognizing of it. You just say, oh, I recognize that. That's a mean one. Or, oh, I recognize that. That's avaricious. I already had a whole chocolate bar. I mean, again, trivial examples, but they apply also on the world scale. Garchen Rinpoche speaks about how our experiences, our own personal experiences, are the fruit of our individual karma, and that experiences in the world, in families, groups, nations, planets, are commonly created karma, the karma we create together. So our individual causes interacting with the causes that others are setting create the tapestry that we see as the picture of the world we live in. So once having heard these words that I've just said, even though they're put in such a funny colloquial kind of way, be certain that you have a role to play in everything that's going on. Even if it's only to recognize that you would like to be acting in such a way and you're choosing not to. Or that you would like to say such and such and you're choosing, in this case, not to. Or you wish you didn't have to do this particular action that might help certain person and you're choosing, in this instance, to do it. Even though you wish you didn't have to, you're going to do it anyway because that person needs a hand. It places us at choice. To recognize our relationship to karma, we're completely at choice. Do you know what at choice means? It means we have the capacity to choose. The meaningful capacity to choose. Where we often are just going willy-nilly, like a snowball down the road. Down the hill, I meant to say. Yes? Yeah. So what I experience with these teachings about karma, even though these are very rudimentary, my understanding is very rudimentary, but I experience the intimacy of the relationship, the trustworthiness of the relationship, the empowerment that the relationship gives me, and a sense of confidence that I have the ability to create good cause, and I have the ability to restrain my habitual tendency to create bad cause. Those abilities are mine, and at any moment I can exercise them. That's pretty potent. And to me, beautiful. It's beautiful. Imagine if everything we did, said, and thought created cause, and we couldn't correct the habit of doing, thinking, or saying that. Imagine if we didn't have the power to bring correction to what is mistaken in our understanding and misapplied in our ways of living and being in the world together. But we do have that power. So to recognize in the mind the seeds of wrongdoing, the seeds meaning that which will cause suffering for self or others, particularly for others, recognizing those seeds at any moment, our work within our capacity to the fullest extent that we're capable is not to engage that intention or habit or impulse of the moment. It's to cut that line of activity in that moment. And even though the habit is very, very strong, if moment by moment by moment, whenever you recognize that tendency wanting to eventuate, if in that moment you refrain, it weakens. That tendency weakens. And you become more confident and more certain of your ability to live in the way that you intend to live, not in the haphazard way of living according to what habits have been laid down. And as soon as you become more confident of that capacity that you have, you will become a better friend to others because you will befriend that capacity in them. And that is precious. That's what Sangha is. Well, we've taken commitments together to see things as they are and to be good company for one another, to be supportive and encouraging. But our power is greater than support and encouragement. We can be mirrors for each other in working with karma. It's profound. It seems like such a little thing, but it's really profound. Everything can change from this moment on. Deal? Yeah? Good. And then there's this wonderful word that gives some people hives. Renunciation. Anybody break out in bumps? What are we renouncing? We're not renouncing ice cream unless, it makes you break out in hives, maybe. We're not renouncing the goodies necessarily. We're renouncing our clinging to them. We're not renouncing desire, as in, the sexual desire, the romantic desire that brings people together in that sacred flame and burns them up sometimes, but sometimes just, fries them nicely, right? So we're not necessarily renouncing the pure elements of experience, but we're now renouncing our clinging to them, the grasping at the notion of self that makes us cling to that which we desire and makes us repudiate that which we hate and makes us very confused and into liars about that which we do not understand. Human beings, I think maybe some other animals, I've seen it in dogs, I've seen it in other animals as well, but the human animal, because I have one of those minds this time around, I'm very aware of some aspects of the human mind. And one of them that I think the Dharma addresses, but maybe in different language, is that humans really panic when we don't know. We really panic. And you'll learn this not by looking at your gross actions of mind, but by if you do a contemplative practice of any kind, or practice when you're looking at the mind itself, or if you're doing a practice based on the breath, for example, sometimes that out-breath, whoa, you feel like, oh, this is the end. Right? I don't know what's going to happen after if the mind is really released on the out-breath, sometimes it can be really the mind has been released and you really don't know what's going to happen next. And there's panic. It may be a very decorous panic, a very delicate, very ephemeral, very subtle, so subtle you might not even know that it's panic, but it's a moment of, and then the next thing that happens is you want certitude. Any kind of certitude will do. And so that's why we call it elaboration. You're following after something, anything. So, how did I get there from renunciation? Oh yeah. We're renouncing the causes ultimately. That's at a deeper level. Sometimes we have to renounce some of the effects or the appearances in order to begin to get free enough to look at renouncing the causes. So for people who have an addiction, whether that's one that we recognize as an addiction, like alcoholism, or whether it's simply a pernicious habit of some sort that we have indulged and find ourselves unable to shake easily or at all, we might have to give up the object or the substance in order to free ourselves from the at least momentarily, from the cause-effect relationship that keeps the habit alive and gripping us. The cause meaning I want it, the effect meaning I'll take it. So if we have to interrupt that relationship, we should do that. But there are more subtle forms of grasping, obsessiveness, and compulsion that really we can recognize in the mind stream simply as this is grasping. Without even an object, we can recognize this in the mind. Clench. We can also recognize this. Or, and this. Panic. And so they don't have to eventuate at that moment in activity that's discernible, but you can increasingly subtly train your recognizing capacity of mind to discern when the three afflictive emotions are starting to stir. And at that moment, just don't say yes. Which is a step towards saying no, but not saying yes is actually more powerful. If you think about it, try it. Play with that. And a lot of this is very playful. You could play with it and see what you learn. But see whether saying no is more powerful or just not saying yes is more powerful. The next time you're confronted with, one of these examples of what you ought not and wish you would not do again. And yet, there it is. So, renunciation. It's the causes. The causes at the subtle level that we want to renounce, but we have to be able to see them, so we clear away the clutter bit by bit. Yeah? And a lot of our practice is directed to clearing away the clutter. But first of all, by establishing clarity about what is an orderly and correct way of thinking about something, and then following that way of thinking. The clutter starts to clear. That's what I meant when I talked about the gradually increasing orderliness of your thought process. Yes? Still with me? Enthusiastically or half asleep? Enthusiastically? Okay, good. There's feedback in the mic, but I like another kind of feedback too. So then when we're renunciating, I'm just guess, okay, when we're renunciating that which causes harm, we're gradually renouncing that which is causing suffering to sentient beings. I don't very often use the word sentient beings because I actually am not sure I know what sentient means, and I'm thinking that all beings are beings, and so there's a point of Lamaistic confusion in my mind about that. I'll have to consult with somebody more learned. But so when we find ourselves recognizing that we don't want to sow the negative karma of causing harm anymore, we're still not yet, and then we're starting to renounce the things that, the actions of body, speech, and mind that do cause harm doing. We're not quite yet at the enthusiastic embrace of desiring the well-being of beings. We're just not wanting to hurt them anymore, right? So let's say we're at that point right now. A lot of us are really not at that point anymore. But let's say for a moment we're at that point right now. If you haven't yet generated the aspiration to free all beings from suffering, which is fairly vast, would you say? Yeah? It's not just about saving this caterpillar. It's all beings, to free all beings from suffering. That's very vast. If we're not there yet, you know what we can do? We can aspire to that aspiration. I aspire to being a being who desires the liberation from suffering of all beings. I aspire to that state. Does that put a little wind in your sails? It does me. Yeah. That's the beginning, at least in my experience, that's the beginning of taking responsibility for claiming, not just taking responsibility, claiming your power spiritually to be of benefit. Maybe you're really far from actions that just naturally arise that are beneficial to beings. Maybe you're not there, but you can aspire to be there. And that's the beginning of the Bodhisattva aspiration. The aspiration of the Bodhisattva is one who aspires to enlightenment for the sake of all beings. This word enlightenment will creep into my language. I have a little lexicon of words that I'm wanting to eliminate from my language for a while until I can have some reasonable confidence that I know what I'm talking about when I use them, because some of them have become buzzwords in the culture. And the E word is one of them. The M word is another one, mindfulness, right? There are articles now about mindfulness Mindfulness Corporation. It's great. I think Western humor is very funny. So, but the aspiration of the Bodhisattva is at first maybe abstract. You know, I'd love to be a person who cares enough about beings that I would like to liberate them all from suffering, but that's pretty abstract. To really act on that, it needs to be very much not abstract. It means to be really in your deep in your heart, and deep in your mind, that this is what rules you. And there's a ways between now and that point. And the way is what we're talking about right now. That's the path. When you become a person who really acts fully in that way, you're a true bodhisattva, and you will attain what we call the E word. You know, and barring karma that we don't know about yet. Right. I'm not on solid ground here when I'm speaking. I'm not going to take all those words back. Just erase. All right. But we know that we're not at that completely full throttle, no holds barred, hard over the fence, everything given. Because we're not there, at least not most of the time, or at least not some of the time. I shouldn't speak like this. I don't know you well enough. Maybe, you know. We're all Buddhas, actually, so what do I know? I'll just speak of myself then. I have moments when I'm like that, and I have moments when I'm not. That probably covers most of us. Yeah. So then we reaffirm the aspiration. It's so simple. When the aspiration isn't ruling us, we reaffirm the aspiration. It's so gentle, it's so loving. It's so loving for us to be loving to ourselves in that way. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we really tend to treat others the way we treat ourselves. And for us to have in our capacity to recognize the innocence of our original error and the beauty of our aspiration, and to be willing to be with ourselves in simplicity, just simply and directly when we fall short of what we aspire to. And then all we have to do is, today I'm just not there, and I really aspire to being like His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche, someone whose love is all-pervading. I aspire to be someone whose very touch brings comfort and solace to others. It's so simple. That which you have not yet realized, you aspire to it. That which in that moment you failed, you aspire to its realization. It's an open doorway to you, just an open doorway. And it's all available to you in your mind. It's the power of intention. We say in the Dharma, motivation is everything. Most of you in the room have attended other Dharma teachings. And have you noticed that we start every teaching pretty much by talking about intention, motivation? It's everything. It's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. And motivation is not it's not this statement of, I wish everybody were happy. That is really flabby. I mean, it's sweet. You know, it's kind of like the Hallmark card version of Dharma intention, right? I wish everybody were happy. Okay, so what are you going to do about that? I mean, us, what are we going to do about that? You got to get some muscle going in there. You have to have traction. Your intention has to rule you, actually. You know that I've spoken of this before in this setting too, I think. That equestrian phrase, throw your heart over the fence. Have you ever heard that? When you're jumping a horse, if there's hesitation at the fence, it can be fatal to both of you. You've got to get over that fence, and you have to start that jump with your mind. That's how the horse knows that he's going to jump the fence. It's because he feels it in your intention. It's really very delicate, the kind of communication, so that when you are approaching the fence, the jump is already accomplished, basically. The intention is so clear that the horse and the rider rise into the air simultaneously, the horse and the rider still together, and over the fence you go. But you have to throw your heart over the fence first. Otherwise, you and the horse are not going over the fence. Will you remember that image? Yeah, throw your heart over the fence. So if you are given to the aspiration that all beings be free of suffering, and that all beings be happy, that they have what they need, and that all beings, oneself included, and one's enemies first of all, they're at the beginning. They're the first prayer in our order of prayer in the prayer book. The enemies, the ones who have harmed us, they're first in line. That we all will realize truth and love without limit. Truth without any impeccable truth, pristine truth, and love, the ultimate love. That's what bodhicitta is. Truth and love. The non-dual, unborn union of truth and love. That's bodhicitta. That's the motivation and the way of the bodhisattva. So that aspiration, if there's even a moment when you feel yourself completely given to that aspiration, your life will change. Actually, your lifetimes going forward will change. And even to hear the word bodhicitta, even before you hear an explanation of it, begins to shift something in the mind, or in the consciousness, or in the something, the great something. It's sometimes when we talk about bodhicitta, it sounds like it's a quality that we're going to develop. Relative bodhicitta is that. Relative bodhicitta we experience as love and compassion in our daily lives. And we all experience love and compassion. We all love, we all have compassion, and we've all experienced being loved and having compassionate mind, speech, and activities given to us for our benefit. So in our relative reality existence, what we experience as love and compassion are the relative reality experience of bodhicitta. It's definitely bodhicitta, but ultimate bodhicitta is our true nature. It's truth, love. Sometimes, I mean, you know how we can't use words for this. Right, I give up. We can't use words. Words cannot, we can point to it or towards it, but we can't describe it. But truth love is the ultimate, that unborn, non-dual union of truth love. That's the ultimate truth. And that's our nature. We are of that. That is us. So ultimate bodhicitta, we already have the seed of that. That seed is our Tathagata Garbha, the enlightenment seed, the seed of realization, and that seed is there. It's our potential. It's our spiritual potential. It cannot be stained. It cannot be harmed in any way. It's unchanging. It's the nature of reality, and we are part of that. So here in relative reality, what we work with is clearing away that which prevents us from realizing and recognizing that ultimate bodhicitta that is already our nature. It's obscured from our vision by our own confusion and by our own ignorance, by our own grasping, our own afflictive emotions, by our own suffering nature. It's obscured from vision, from our clear sight. But even hearing this is like activating a little magnet. We're magnetized by truth at the same time that we're fleeing suffering. So it's like a little golden key, and the key is called bodhicitta, and then with just a little turn, the Lama goes like this, click, and something shifts within. Now, some of you have experienced that already, right? Sitting with the Lama, and your tears are pouring down your face, so the Lama is talking about bodhicitta, and you see tears in the room. People are melting. We call it misting or melting. That's the bodhicitta being stirred. It's not emotion that's happening when the weeping is happening, when the tears come. It's not emotion. You're not crying because you're feeling sad or deeply moved. Click. Click. Something is stirred within. Couldn't be stirred if it weren't already within. There is no spiritual Walmart that we're going to go to buy our bodhicitta. 2 for the price of 1. It's 1 for the illusion of 2. So, these are the 3 trainings of the Bodhisattva that I've just spoken of since we came back from T&P. Karma, renunciation, and aspiration. And this afternoon we're going to talk about how to do it. We're going to talk about relative bodhicitta, and the essence of which is really exchanging self for others. We're going to talk about Tonglen, practice of that. And but that's going to be fairly brief because I want to get to the even ifs in the text, starting with verse 12. Please read these during lunch because I want you to familiarize yourself with them a little bit. We have a nice lunch break. It's 2 hours. So verses 12 to 21. That's your assignment for the midday break, to read and contemplate. These are the outrageous verses. I think sometimes about talking with Zangpo writing those verses and thinking of his own experience, and then having great compassion for us, but also kind of chuckling as he wrote them. So we have 7 minutes before we break for lunch. Anybody want to say anything? Or make a noise? Express yourself? Yes. And I'm quite deaf, actually, so speak away up.
The aspiration to cause no harm can get very tricky.
Mm-hmm.
From stepping on insects, which may cause them suffering, or instant enlightenment, who knows. How do you overcome that with the aspiration intention of causing no harm?
Love. You cannot exist in this world as a physical being without causing death and suffering to countless others whom you don't even know exist. Every breath in and every breath out, microbes are, microscopic beings are being taken in and exhaled. It's not possible. We live in that interdependent reality where everything is touching everything else. And sometimes it's going to hurt. So for this retreat, you're the bug person, because everybody brings up the bugs at some point. It's like, because it's so in our face. Particularly, if we spend any time actually indoors is just as rich with bugs. So the question becomes, how do you live with the fact that you're causing harm just because you're alive? Isn't that the question that you're asking? How do you?
Yeah, how far do you go? I work with a medically fragile child that's freaked out about bugs.
I'm sorry, you work with what?
I work with a medically fragile child that's freaked out about bugs.
About bugs, right.
So I'm always capturing bugs and whatnot and taking them outside, as opposed to her family's tradition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of stomping. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it makes a difference just to show another way
Yes.
of dealing with
Yeah.
something that is innate in our environment, everybody's environment.
But that's love. That's love. You're showing loving action rather than hating action.
Yeah, I fear it, therefore I smash it.
Yes. But also, I find as I'm rescuing bugs, very often I'm killing them. They are so fragile. The exoskeleton of a tarantula, for example, is like tissue paper, And so even the well-intended action can cause suffering, but the intention is also a seed of good. And the action, there's some karma in causing the suffering, but the greatest part of karma is our intention. So cultivate the intention of love, and even sometimes we must kill. Sometimes we must cause suffering in order to be of benefit in some other way. It happens. We have that responsibility sometimes. And then love is the way. I know it sounds like another Hallmark card, but love really is the way in that case. In some of the native traditions in this continent, In order to survive, people ate meat, of course. And so it would be, forgive me, Father, not Father God, Father dear, fear, or grandmother, or forgive me, thank you for your life, I will use it well to take care for those I'm responsible for, and I'll teach them to take your life with respect and gratitude. So those are the pathways of love in the mind that produce ways of, give rise to ways of behaving that are in harmony even when suffering is being caused. We cannot not cause suffering, but we can always not intend it. We can always intend the good. Yes? Is that helpful to you?
Yeah.
And you can explain this to the child,
Yeah, that's what I was
right?
trying to explain it all.
Yeah, you could write a story. Are you creative? Do you write stories? How did I know that? You could write a story about this.
It helps to give the bug a name.
Yes, yeah.
There is a small spider that lives in her room called Brownie. Once Brownie got a name, he wasn't so scary.
Yes, it
We
may.
have too many brownies, but.
Yes, and you want to have a rainbow of the little spider. But yes, that's an excellent example of how you're demonstrating the relationship that we often don't even acknowledge exists. But you're demonstrating it, and the child will learn something in that process. Right? Thank you. Okay, 2 minutes. Hi.
I have a question about don't grab it, don't push it away, don't make a story about it. That seems really clear. I find myself in situations sometimes where I'll have an interaction with someone and there'll just be this immediate, or the person will say something to me that really clicks into my habitual patterns in a negative way. And there's just this immediate knee-jerk, and so I sometimes feel confused about whether I should just go directly. I feel like I should just go directly to try and look at the essence of the experience and experience the experience. Look at the essence of what is aware of the experience. But this thing about don't make a story about it, there's a part of me that wants to see what is going on here, which is a more analytical thing. Why am I reacting to this the way I am? How can I, what is, I think there's a story that's there in a split second.
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not even really aware of. And so there's a part of me that wants to kind of unearth what's the story here that's causing the reaction, and how can I work with that?
Well, I think in the moment, what you want to do is not create more negative karma. So in the moment, non-reaction, non-elaboration.
Yeah, I zip my mouth.
If necessary, yeah. And then analytic contemplation is very valuable. I mean, we have intelligence for good reason. And you can sit with that kind of an event and you can pull apart the threads of context and conditioning and so on and see something, but don't confuse conditioning with cause, right? We often say, I did it because of such and such, and usually those are the conditions that have brought that to maturity, to fruition, that seed of karma, but they're not the cause of it. The cause is in the mind stream. The cause is in consciousness, not an event, or in somebody else's mind or action. And lunchtime. So you can think about that some more. Take a look at the even ifs, because they are quite related to what you're talking about. Okay. Thank you for your wonderful attention this morning. at some points I thought maybe this is a bit more abstract than it ought to be. But I think we went through this together, and I think we're together now, and we'll have lunch in conscious communication only, no chatter, and we'll come back at 2, and you'll have contemplated slightly at least the even ifs. Okay? But before that, we'll be talking about relative bodhicitta a little bit, and then we'll do the even ifs. Thank you so much for being here. And because we're in retreat and it's unbroken, we don't do the dedication of merit in the middle of the day. We'll do it at the end of each day. Okay? Lovely. Okay, enjoy your lunch.